the Pentagon, Press Secretary John Kirby. Welcome back to Fox News Sunday. John, I know yesterday General Milley spoke to his Ukrainian counterpart, and all week you had the president of Ukraine suggesting that the White House is overstating the risk. But is it also possible that the president of Ukraine is underplaying the risk?
Look, we're in constant communication with our Ukrainian counterparts. Secretary Austin has spoken to his as well. We're making sure we're sharing information and context as best we can. I can't speak for what President Zelensky is saying or what he's saying and certainly what he's saying about what he's saying, but we've been nothing but clear and transparent about our concerns here at the Pentagon over this rapid buildup over the last few months around the border with Ukraine and in Belarus, not to mention, maritime activity by the Russians in the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. So what we've said, Dana, is that he has a lot of options. Putin has a lot of options available to him if he wants to further invade Ukraine, and he can execute some of those options imminently.
So what is the Pentagon's definition of imminent?
Imminent means it could happen really honestly at any time. Now, when I say it depends on what Vladimir Putin might want to do. Again, as Secretary Austin said on Friday, he has a lot of options, a lot of capability available to him. He could do something on a small scale. He could do something on a fairly large scale. And he continues to add troops to that border with Ukraine. We're watching that even over the course of this weekend. So he increases his ability to choose options and to do something if he wants to act militarily. The other thing that we've said, though, Dana, is it doesn't have to come to conflict. We still believe there's room and space for diplomacy, and we'd like to see that be the solution here.
Certainly, I know that the Pentagon has been very much urging diplomacy, and I understand the need for a deterrent on the back end. But as you've just pointed out, Vladimir Putin has already escalated this quite a bit. And so is there any possibility that it would be worth it to maybe name the banks that would be sanctioned, or to take some sort of effort now to show them that we mean business, and to ask, do you want a little bit more of that if it gets any worse?
I think we've been very clear with Mr. Putin about the economic consequences that could come his way and the way of the Russian people should he further incur and invade inside Ukraine. And one of the things about sanctions is once you trip that, then the deterrent effect is lost. So I think we've been very, very clear that we're going to look at sanctions and economic consequences, the likes of which we have not looked at before or even considered, even as far back as 2014. We don't want to lose that deterrent effect. The other thing is, the Russians talk about it. One of the last things they want is a strong and bolstered NATO on their western flank. If he does another invasion inside Ukraine, that's exactly what they're going to get. They're going to see the United States and our NATO allies bolster our capabilities on the eastern flank of the alliance.
I'm glad you brought up NATO, because that was actually what I wanted to ask you about as well. It's an organization that runs by consensus. It's a lot of different players. Germany is certainly giving everyone a little bit of headaches and heartburn, given that it's got such a reliance on Russia in terms of its energy. You had France wanting to go its own way. Turkey is a very strange ally at this point in NATO's history. Given all of this and going forward, do you believe that NATO can survive, and should it survive?
Absolutely, yes and yes. The Secretary spoke with his French and German counterparts just on Friday morning before he went out to the press room here, and they were very good conversations. The French and the Germans are the same level of concern out of them about what they're seeing from Russia doing as we have. Now, each country in the alliance has to act within their own dictates. Of course, they're sovereign states, but both of them are deeply concerned about what we see Russia doing, and both of them are incredibly strong NATO allies. Germany hosts thousands of U.S. troops on their soil. We couldn't have fought the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan without their support. They very much are strong allies, and we're confident that NATO is going to stay united.
All right. So let me also ask you a little bit more about the energy policy, because a lot of this all has to come back to where do you get your energy? Listen to the Wall Street Journal. This is an editorial from this week. The self-created energy vulnerability of the West is one of the horrifying marvels of the age. You have to go back to the disarmament of the 1920s to recall a time of such willful self-delusion. Even as President Biden races to rescue Europe, his Build Back Better plan would send the U.S. down the same road of energy disarmament. John, does the Pentagon factor in the United States' own energy partner when it considers what all needs to be done to protect us in the future?
Well, what we like to have is a lot of options here at the Pentagon, and that means diversification of alternatives for our logistics and our sustainment. And without speaking to larger U.S. energy policy, I mean, we absolutely always look at alternatives to our own energy flow here at the Defense Department. And I know that the Biden administration is also working with countries around the world to talk about alternative energy suppliers, energy routes, energy alternatives, should the Russians try to use energy as some sort of weapon in this conflict.
All right, I want to ask you also about China, because no doubt China is watching what is happening in Ukraine. And you saw just last Sunday alone, China sent 39 warplanes over Taiwan to try to intimidate that small island. Is China seeing enough of a pushback, enough of strength from the U.S. and NATO in Ukraine to deter it from trying to go after Taiwan after the Olympics?
I think one of the things you can read into some of this increased China activity here is, in fact, that they recognize that the international community remains committed to trying to achieve some sort of stability and peace there in the Indo-Pacific region, and that the United States has been very clear and very consistent about our commitment to Taiwan's ability to defend itself through the Taiwan Relations Act. We've been very consistent about our one China policy, and I think they see the way we have marshaled allies and partners throughout the Indo-Pacific region. 5 of our 7 treaty alliances are in the Pacific, and they know that. And we're working on those alliances and partnerships. And I think some of what you're seeing out of their activity is a recognition on their part that we and our partners and our allies are actually only getting stronger, only getting more resolved to see a free and open Indo-Pacific.
Someone who might not agree is the leader of North Korea, desperate for attention always. This year alone, and today is only January 30th, North Korea has reportedly conducted more missile tests, including one this weekend, than they did in all of 2021. So 7 tests this month. So is the president spending enough time paying attention to North Korea, or do we need to focus a little bit more on that as he tries to increase his capabilities?
No, the administration, and certainly here at the Defense Department, laser focused on the challenges to the Korean Peninsula coming out of Pyongyang. We are in close coordination and consultation with our allies and partners. That's not just South Korea, but Japan as well, about the threats that the burgeoning ballistic missile program by Kim Jong-un continues to present. I mean, we noticed this launch over the weekend. We have condemned that. It is a violation of UN Security Council resolutions, and we're going to be discussing that with, again, allies and partners around the world. I mean, but the other thing is, here, we've got to make sure that alliance on the Korean Peninsula is strong. We remain committed to a denuclearized Korean Peninsula. We remain committed to diplomatic talks. We've told Pyongyang we're willing to sit down without precondition to have those kinds of dialogues. But obviously, Kim Jong-un wants to go a different way. So we have to make sure that we're ready militarily on the peninsula and in the region.
Also, just more back here, focusing on some criticism in the U.S. military that perhaps there's too much of a leftward tilt or a wokeness in our military when we face really determined adversaries, committed adversaries in China, Russia, Iran, who maybe don't have those same kind of pressures. How do you respond to those criticisms?
Well, it depends on what they are, but I think a lot of it, quite frankly, is driving a stake through a straw man here. This argument of wokeness in the military. I was in the military for 30 years, and I can tell you things like diversity and inclusion. That makes us a better military because it brings to the fore in the decision making, operational decision making that we conduct, better ideas, more unique perspectives, somebody else's lived experiences, which might actually make us smarter on the battlefield. So I mean, those kinds of arguments, I think are ridiculous because we are a stronger military because of our diversity and because we represent all Americans just like we defend all Americans.
One last quick question. I've been watching these stories come out of Syria as ISIS tries to reconstitute itself. How concerned is the Pentagon that this is a real possibility?
Well, look, I mean, our job in Syria is very limited to counter ISIS fights and to helping the Syrian Democratic Forces continue to go after that threat. Nobody wants to see Syria further destabilized as what it already is. I think it's important, and we've said this routinely, that all neighboring nations, particularly in that region, should have a stake in a more stable Syria. We don't want to see refugee flows. We certainly don't want to see the conflict expand. But for us, our purpose here at the Pentagon is to make sure that we're staying locked on to that ISIS threat, which still exists in Syria and, quite frankly, in Iraq, too.
John, thank you for joining us today. Good luck to whichever team you are supporting in the NFL Sunday that we're about to have. Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana.